So, can we have a slide there, Jennifer? And we go with Salvia Divinorum. How many people have tried Salvia Divinorum? Just a few. Very interesting plant. For many years it's languished as considered to be a real minor, if at all, effective theatrical plant. And the reason for that is that many people have never have tried it and nothing's happened. And that's been largely the method that this has been circulated about how it's used. And I'd like to express an idea that came to me last week in thinking about this. Since there's so many of these plants that are being recently introduced into our culture or subculture from other places, they're coming in with this is a one-shot chance to introduce new plants with the, as Terence said, the memes that go with these, the shorthand descriptions of what becomes the slogan or the thing that's attached to it, and often they're false or misunderstandings. For example, with peyote, the tufts have strychnine. I mean, isn't that kind of a thing that goes with the peyote in the conceptual?
That's not true?
Thing? It's not true at all, no. In fact, people have experimented with taking lots and lots of just the tufts to prove that, and they've been analyzed. It's just a myth. It's a rumor. And a meme, in essence. These plants come into our culture with, well, as they're introduced, it's real critical. What are the memes that are attached to these things? And they're, like with salvia, what came in with that was the literature reports of you chew up, up to 100 leaves or more. And chewing them up and swallowing, or make juice out of it and drink it. And those methods don't really work when people have tried it. One of our colleagues, Brad, whose name has come up many times this week, has apprenticed with the Mazatec family for 8 years now, going each year. And he always ends up there in the season when mushrooms aren't happening. And this family uses mushrooms, morning glory seeds, and Salvia Divinorum. And the method that they use the salvia with him is to take 13 pairs of the leaves, and they're stacked up, and they're leaves about yay big. This is just the flowering tops from the greenhouse, so they're not really, the leaves aren't really that as large as they are lower down. They get double or triple the length and sizes. I'll pass that around.
Here you can see the full-size leaf and the smaller leaves in your flower.
Sometimes the leaves will be almost that size.
Does it matter if you use the mature leaves or the younger leaves?
No, it doesn't matter. It's just the quantity.
It's like a big size-wise, almost as big as a tobacco.
Yeah, this would be about full size of a good, really good large leaf. Generally, they're smaller. And these are stacked. The traditional method that Brett has been introduced is they're stacked up. It's rolled up like a cigar. And they say to nibble them slowly until this log of salvia leaves has been chewed. And they're swallowed. And his reports, I didn't really believe him either, because it just hasn't worked for people trying this in experimental subculture here. But his reports were that indeed, and they take it at night in silence, and they say it sounds like a dog barking in the village. That interrupts the thing, and they shut down the ceremony. Sing the entire time also. But otherwise it's silence and complete darkness. The last candle goes out when the leaves are presented to chew. And his reports were amazing, that it was completely transforming. He had no idea how to navigate this very different dimensional space. He had no sensation of having a body or an identity, just an awareness, and that awareness being in a very unfamiliar dimensional universe that had nothing to do with being in Mazatec land or being in a room or sitting in a chair. He no longer had any awareness of that. It lasts about 45 minutes and then wears off. But this is something that really, I don't think hardly anyone's been able to reproduce this effect with homegrown leaves. He's one of the few people that insists that it works. Well, last year, a group of people had been trying to figure out how to make this work, and myself included, and came up with the method that works. And it does relate to the way the Mazateks take it, but only around the back door, kind of. This is the method that works for Salvia. 6 to 10 leaves, and I generally take 13 leaves, but it depends on the size, but 6 to 10 leaves like this. Chew them up, but don't swallow the saliva. Don't swallow the leaves. Just chew them up really well, and it's all about absorbing it through your mouth. And I sort of push it all around under my tongue and the sides of my cheeks and just hold the slurry and keep it moving around. You end up with a lot of saliva. The leaves are bitter, but not impossibly bitter.
You don't swallow the saliva.
You don't swallow any of it, no. And hold it in your mouth.
How long?
And at 10 minutes on your watch, almost precisely for everyone, at 10 minutes it comes on. And it comes on gently but quickly. My recommendation is do it in the dark without visual distractions, and you'll see what happens. If you try this, you'll know what I mean. After 10 minutes, you'll understand the experience. Universally, people get a profound experience trying this quid chewing method. And how that relates to the way the Mazateks do it traditionally is that, well, as Jonathan was saying, they believe that they say that the plant came from outside, that it's not a long tradition of use in Mazatec culture, that it was introduced somehow in the past, in the relatively recent past. And so maybe they never really had a lot of time to experiment with how to make it work properly. It works for them when they chew this many leaves because slowly nibbling it takes at least 10 minutes. And so, in effect, you've got this stuff in your mouth for 10 minutes. They're swallowing it. That's irrelevant. And people in our subculture that have tried it, because it's bitter, wolf it down, thinking that you want to get it into your stomach. And the same with juicing it and swallowing the juice. It doesn't work. Putting it in a blender with water and chugging it doesn't work. It's all about absorption through the mouth.
You don't have it. Do you put anything that when people chew properly?
There's no lime, no other additives.
But I might mention that the Mazateks do make juice, as I described. They crush up the leaves on an Atlantic four-bobber or strain that and drink that. And there are reports that does work. That worked for the hope nuts, for example. Mm-hmm. And we can't say that it doesn't work. It works much, much better.
And it could well be that holding that juice in the mouth would be the equivalent effect.
Yeah, they swallow it though.
Salvinorin A is the compound that's now known almost certainly to be the active principle.
You might mention smoking.
Yeah, smoking the dried leaves has a marijuana-like effect. That's the reputation. Some people get it, some people don't. Me, I smoke a joint of dried salvia leaves, and it's a bit like cannabis. It's different. It's short. It lasts maybe a half an hour. You notice something's different. I notice something's different with my awareness, but it's not very profound. Other people, one toke, and their body starts falling apart in little cubes on the floor and melt into a puddle.
I get the same effect from smoking as chewing as it's not smoking. It's not cannabis. It's definitely salvia.
Anyway, chewing this quid of leaves is the way to do it. Do it in the dark, lay down, and just wait. 10 minutes, you'll have this. The experience is many people report it with consistent variables. It's dimensional. It's about topography and not 3 dimensions, but some other experience of dimensions. This, the table, room, the linear 3 dimensions don't apply there. I agree with Brett, that's why it seems so hard to navigate and unfamiliar. It's really, literally about time and dimensions, a new experience of that.
And curved space,
right.
People think they're a cylinder or a tube or a sphere.
Yeah.
What duration is the?
It lasts about 45 minutes. During the chewing of this thing, laying down, should someone knock on your door or the phone rings, you can turn the light on, get up and walk over to the phone, talk perfectly normally, turn the light back off, lay down, and it'll come back on again. It's real easy to shake it off, despite the fact that it's pretty profound what's happening. That's why it's recommended to do it in the dark, because you don't want to superimpose the experience on 3-dimensional reality. It's Zen-like in that if you concentrate real hard, you don't get it. If you just shift back, it happens. It's dramatic, but it's subtle. Not really that subtle. That's not the right word. It's not so compelling that you can't shake it off by getting up. But yeah, you don't really want to get up and move around that much. Jonathan made an experiment once, real casually, before he had to go to dinner at his relative's place, and he was testing chewing 6 leaves or something, and then he took it out of his mouth, realizing he had to go to dinner, and was really intoxicated for another hour in broad daylight with something to do. Anyway, that works. Now,
What do you do with the quid after it comes out? Swallow?
some people take it out at 10 minutes, and then its duration's shorter. Other people believe that if you keep holding it in your mouth, it keeps lasting. I don't know. I've never had it last more than 45 minutes by holding it in the entire time. And then I've ended up swallowing the stuff. You can spit it out. It's, yeah, so it works smoking it. It works with this quid method. It's definitely the way to go. 6 leaves is really works. I take 13 just because it's a Mayan number. But it's not necessary. And so you can imagine growing one plant, you can harvest 6 leaves pretty regularly. I've noticed a thing about cultivating it that's interesting. I have a long greenhouse full of it along one side. They're flowering right now. When I left, they were in early January. They flower in December, January. Maybe 10 feet tall, the plants, in beds. And sometimes, and this may be related to the fact that it's a cloned plant. It hasn't been found in nature. It doesn't make seeds. It's produced from cuttings. But each of the families, once again, like the ayahuasca traditions, they don't share their clones. So there's several. It's only found on 2 hills in Mazatec territory at a certain elevation, and there's only so many families that live up there. So it's one of the world's rarest plants in essence, but it's also a cultivar. It's never been found in the wild. These people grow it around the edges of their coffee plantations or under the trees. It likes pretty much full shade and lots of humidity. But I think because of this, it's been grown from cuttings for so long, it has a strange genetic flaw. I think it has a latent virus. Periodically, the leaves will come out under stress, curled and funny, mutated, like a virus. It gets expressed periodically under stress, but it'll grow out of that. But an interesting thing that I've noticed happening since having so much of it is once in a while on branches, a shoot will come out. Instead of having the opposite leaves, it'll have 3 leaves. And it'll be hexagon shaped, the stem, instead of square. And so it's producing another third as many leaves as it grows. And I'm propagating that clone because it's more, it's great. You get more out of it faster. Then I noticed there's one that makes 4 leaves at every junction. So it's twice as many leaves produced. And I hope that stays steady as a clone. It may revert back to the normal form. But there's those 2 new forms of it coming along down the tubes. There's Brett, fortunately, has collected from 2 different families, different strains. There's the Wasson strain that has been around for a while. There's what we call the palatable strain, and it's not very bitter. It tastes like off-tasting lettuce. Yeah.
Is it available generally for some medicinal purpose? Or
No.
How can you get it? You just
Yeah, we sell live plants of it and dried leaves of it. I was considering setting up a service to airship overnight fresh leaves, but that's a hassle.
But Rob, don't you think now that the pure compound has been isolated, that it probably has greater potential to be a craze than anything we've seen in 30 years?
Well, the pure compound is maybe too alarming.
Incredibly intense and active in microgram quantities, 300 to 500 micrograms smoke. Absolutely reality obliterating. I don't want to. I mean, are you deliberately not mentioning this?
No, I'll get into it. But this is coming from someone that
I
thinks DMT is
I would
shocking.
run it as a headline and not torment people with the obscurante. The hottest news going. It's an isoquinone.
It's
not
a
an
terpene.
alcohol.
And it's legal.
Sesquiterpene. It's
That's
the
a
first new
psychoactive.
psychedelic family in 30 years, and in spite of the fact that it's a rare plant in Oaxaca, it's being grown all over, and it's
Legal.
easily isolated.
Yep.
Just understand that you have to be able to accurately measure 500 gamma in order to keep from going over the top.
I should have brought some.
Have you got over the top?
I'm sure.
Are you asking me?
Yes, I am.
No, I talked to Rick Strassman, and his description of it is so appalling that I took myself off the active list. Specifically, he said, if you have any delusional flaw in your personality, it will balloon to infinity. So I realized that was not for me.
It's pretty wild.
One thing I might mention that has backed him up in terms of smoking, it's a good synergy with cannabis. I mean, it's not as profound.
So it's been said. I haven't tried that.
Yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah, others have said that mixing it 50-50 with cannabis changes both of them, and it's advisable.
Unique receptor site?
Yeah.
Is it easy to grow?
Real easy to grow. Yeah.
Indoor house
Houseplant. If it's humid and it doesn't freeze and you keep it watered, it does really well. It doesn't like dry air.
Can we discuss an extraction sometime?
Yeah, I guess.
While we're on cultivation, what kind of soil? Because I've had some problems cultivating, but I think my soils are too dense.
Yeah, it needs a real nice sandy kind of loose humus.
Sandy loose.
Yeah, black humus with sand mixed in, something nice and loose, and watered real well. I mean, if you could have a drip going on it all the time, it would like that. I suggest to people to cultivate it in their bathroom if it's a bright bathroom, and have a shower. Put the potted plant in the bathtub or shower stall when you have a shower if it's not scalding hot. And do that most people shower every day or two. So it's a reliable way to give it humidity. Usually your bathroom's more humid than elsewhere in the house. And it doesn't like full sun at all. It likes subdued light.
How high does it grow?
It gets, you mean in elevation or the plant? The plant. Well, I've got a greenhouse that's 10 feet tall, and it's a Quonset type thing. And I still have one branch I didn't cut from last year. It grew up to the top and back down, and halfway back up again.
I support them against the side of my house, and they get up to the roof level at the corner, which is about 4 meters high.
Yeah, and they flower in, like I say, in December, at least in Northern California, probably anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere.
How big a plant does it take to?
They need a lot of root space. They start getting funny when they're root bound. I have them in free-ranging beds, and they just grow like crazy. One winter, 3 years ago, it froze in the greenhouse. I came in the morning. It was a really bad year, and I have an unheated greenhouse, and the leaves were all stuck on them. The ones that were touching the plastic were stuck to the plastic, frozen on there. The plant. I looked down the stems. The stalks of the plants had burst open and had like their own frozen juices, like an icicle up the middle. It was horrible to look at. Seeing it burst open cells, and they all melted down and regrew in the spring. Yeah. So they're hardy if they don't freeze really strongly. If they're in a pot outdoors and that happens, it could freeze the roots and they would die. But
How large a pot would you put?
at first a gallon pot until you notice the roots are filling the pot, and then I think a 5-gallon pot will hold them pretty well as a house plant. I have one in a big 5-gallon container, and indoors, also in our house, and it does really fine. We have unregulated heat. It's a wood stove, so sometimes it gets cold at night, but never freezing in the house. Water wouldn't freeze inside of the house. So they like cool weather. They don't like it really hot. When it gets really hot, the leaves will wilt. That's a good reason to have them in shade, too. To address the topic of extraction, we did take, I guess it was about a half a kilo of leaves, and that's around 1,000 leaves, and rendered it into a compound that was then recrystallized and tested out to be pure, virtually pure Salvinorum A.
Yeah.
And how?
We got mass spec data.
How is it done?
It's a little complicated to explain it. I was asked not to, Terence.
What?
I was asked not to say that. Well, I'm not lying. I can't remember exactly. It's solvent. Let's see. How does it go?
Wait a second. Let me say.
Thank you, Jonathan.
This about the expression. I would suggest. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to tell people how to purify this stuff. But I would suggest you try to leave first and see if you like it. A lot of people don't like this stuff at all. In fact, no less an authority than Andy Weil said, quote, it was so horrifying it has absolutely no abuse potential.
That's what they said about DMT.
Right. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people don't like DMT.
Well, yeah, that's the other difficulty. You end up with it was a pretty high yield. There were many doses out of a pound, and it's just this like a grain of salt or 2 grains of salt, that kind of thing is a dose, and it's very hard to calibrate. I just eyeball it.
So maybe a way to dose it would be to like dissolve it in water.
That's yeah. We've done that volumetrically and then evaporating it. It dissolves in acetone, so it's. What was that? It's called Salvinorum A. SALVINORUM. IN.
What is it over solvent?
Well, it dissolves readily in warm acetone, and it will stay in acetone.
So use an acetone extract.
Also in chloroform, methylene chloride.
Yeah.
Metal chloride?
Yeah, you want to get rid of the chlorophyll and precipitate out the compound. But like Terence was saying, here's something that's not an alkaloid. It's a terpene. There are no psychoactive terpenes, at least not on this order. This is something active in micrograms, and that's pretty unusual also. And it's more powerful than LSD. It's way more powerful than DMT, and that's hard to conceive of. Well, monkeying around with the dose was kind of a daring thing to do with a new compound, but one tries.
We still don't really know what to do.
How high did you take it in your own lab?
About 700 micrograms.
I think Strassen did probably twice that.
Oh, that would be really sad. It's scary. It's terrifying. I smoked what was, I just eyeballed it out. It's a tiny amount, put into a pipe and smoked. It has to be vaporized, by the way. What we did was take a thin glass tube. It was less than 1/4 of an inch inner diameter, just a glass tube, piece of glass tubing, yay long. Heated it on a propane gas burner, and bent it so that maybe an inch of the end was angled at a 45-degree angle.
Like the Tibetan jungle.
Yeah. And then I took a little piece of brass pipe screen, just a little tiny piece, rolled it in a loose ball, and stuffed it into the crook of this bend, so that the powder wouldn't go right up into the mouth. And choke on it really slowly, just to keep air aspirating through it. And you heat it with the flame, but keep the lighter flame below it, and watch the compound. It melts, then it vaporizes. It takes some finesse to get this down. Yeah, but it's such a
much higher melting. 240-degree melting point versus 45 degrees.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of finesse to get it. So you just keep poking on it and it melts and vaporizes.
That's before
Small
the melting point?
I guess so, yeah. I haven't seen the melting point of it. But yeah, it's just you detect a tiny puff of white smoke stream, and then
You can't feel or taste anything.
no, it has no flavor. And it comes on, unlike DMT, which gives you the grace of a moment or two of entry, as dramatic as that entry is. This has no transition.
But it takes longer. There's a slight latent period. You're sitting there for a second or two, maybe as much as 30 seconds, thinking, they really exaggerated this one. And then it doesn't really do it. And that's usually the last thing you remember.
So, John, what is all this about? This is all in the press. It's going to be published in the Journal of Pharmacology.
I don't know if anyone is behind this. I haven't yet. And I don't think anyone else is. But I plan on writing that for
Nichols has an article in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology.
That maybe, I don't know.
I think the next issue will spill the beans in a big way.
Yeah, it's going to have a big impact. This really is big news. This is one of the most amazing discoveries since LSD. Really.
And the compound's been around for 10 years.
No one tested it. Valdez
The
extracted
test
it.
is another argument against using animals. They
If
used
you're-
animal assays to isolate this compound, and that was it.
If you're interested in the extraction procedure to purify salvinorinate from the leaves, go back to the Valdez paper. It's referenced in Jonathan's
Commercially
book.
available?
Not yet,
That's
but
the
it will
method I
be.
use.
I'm going to put it
Without
on the
the-
market.
Yeah.
PLDEZ.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the extraction method.
What was that again?
The Valdez paper, it's in reference in Jonathan's book, describes the extraction procedure, and that works. That you get the material.
Actually, it was first isolated by Ortega 3 years before.
And you can use dried leaves for the
Have you ever
extraction.
tried to compound sublingually or some other root of
It
it?
apparently does not work sublingually, pure compound.
And you have to leave too.
It's not works. Yeah, it's really uncanny. It's amazing. It's a real mystery plant, a mystery compound. The plant works orally, or something. Compound, and if you burn it, if you put it and burn it with a flame like CND or ash, it doesn't work. So it is a lot. This is just cutting edge data that's come out. I'll
When you
describe
do sublingual application studies using dimethyl sulfoxide salt, that way, it doesn't seem to dissolve in the but in DNA first and you probably hear it value twice back. It's really hard to get a good current.
it takes some working to vaporize, and probably eventually it's either destroyed or not. Yeah.
I notice you have a lot of information when it's solid.
Oh, if I tried to describe to you the steps of extracting it, I wouldn't be giving you exactly the accurate procedure because I've tried to say it before and I can't remember exactly. I'm not bullshitting.
No, I
would be
might
giving.
be a legal problem.
No, well, some people initially really said, don't release this information, this stuff will become illegal really quickly, it's not a street drug potential type thing. If people start doing this, there could be some serious problems. I smoked a moderate amount of it and felt an effect. So fine, it's really hard to calibrate. Jonathan came to visit and we decided to try it in this glass pipe method. I eyeballed out what looked like an okay amount, put it in there.
This wasn't even the pure compound. This is a crude precipitate of maybe 30% potency.
Yeah, and it might have been, I think it was maybe 1.2 milligrams or maybe not even 1.5 milligrams of this crude amount. It was maybe equivalent to about 500 or maybe 600-700 mics of salvinorinate. And I smoked it. We had a candle on and just sitting down on a bed. And again, there's not really this transition phase. I didn't remember that it had a latency period of going, I wonder if this is going to work. It just sort of suddenly is not there and then it's there. Really bizarre. I laid back and then suddenly sat up again when it came on, and it was like my mind was just smeared like a rotten tomato across something, topographic, like out into and as this smearing was happening, I had a familiarity, like I'm going to this place I've been and I didn't like it then and I don't want to go there, and I went in my mind I was going, no, not this, and that was my entry into this. What happened was I was on, this is going to sound really stupid, it was like a gigantic wagon wheel suspended in eternal void, very big, and my awareness was smeared along the rim of this thing, the surface, it was about a topographic surface. It was shaped like a big wagon wheel with kind of like a 1950s space station, I think. Brilliant, shiny orange formica. And I was smeared on the rim of this thing, looking down one of the spokes, and panicked. No more. I felt like I had really, like somebody had stuck a spoon in my head and turned it around, and I was really messed up, and it was never going to ever be the same again. And it was terrifying. But beyond being able to be panicking, it was just, oh boy, here we are. But I remember feeling so messed up. But my awareness must have been present because I remember Jonathan had smoked it right after me, and so I said to him,
"Am I okay?"
I said, "Are you okay?"
Tremulous voice.
Remembering that he was there too, and I don't know what happened.
I thought we should write a book. Am I okay?
But it's strange, and all of the people that have tried it in large doses have had this reality-dissolving experience that has to do with dimensions. One person said it was like the universe was suddenly unzipped and opened up inside out.
So that's a good description. That's more or less what I experienced. It's like I was looking at everything that was still in the room, but it's almost as though it were, sort of like what Terence described, a zany cartoon running in full speed and backwards. It was as though the whole surface of the topography, as Rob said, the whole surface, suddenly it became patently obvious to me that it was just a facade overlaid, a very thin, just like a costume you could zip up and take off. And that's a real profound awareness. I don't think anybody could have it in a high enough dose and ever have any certainty that that's what they were looking at. Of course, I never believed that. For a long time, I haven't believed that was the real thing anyway. But this is very graphically obvious. And I felt that it literally unzipped and rolled up as though it were a carpet and you were inside. And so the apparent surface, and then shot down the tube like someone then flushed the toilet. It's hard to describe. And these are just impressions. It's not like that.
It's not something you'd really
enjoy.
enjoy.
Did you want to do it again?
What's that?
When you were done, when you came back, you just said, "See, I'd like to do that again," or?
Well, I have done it since, but not that way. I mean, more or less trying to build up trying to find the minimum act.
People that take it in a small amount enjoy it. Sometimes people laugh when it comes on.
I should say the leaves themselves are so potent, just chewing by this quid method that Rob described, that anyone that just did that would have a real healthy respect for this plant. And a lot of people after that wouldn't even be in the least get interested in getting a more purified form of it, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
The technique was described in which book, you say?
It's an article by Leander Valdez.
The easiest isolation procedure is in Ortega's paper.
I think that's better.
Single column cleanup, one step.
Okay. Well, you can refer to that for the exact
It's in
information.
J or Chem.
It's not hard.
It's in the what?
J or Chem, Journal of Organic Chemistry.
And this was given also in
References
Jonathan's book.
The reference for these
Which
articles.
book?
Pharmacopoeia.
Okay.
There's a mini chapter on solid urine about plastic.
So anyway, there's a plant you ought to grow and experiment with, and it's really easy to propagate. You can root them in water and plant them when they have roots. Cuttings survive quite well. My friend Brad, he was collecting it from this Mazatec family, got a couple of branches, but he was going to Guatemala and before he was coming back to the U.S., so he carried it with him to Guatemala, just a branch, unrooted, with the leaves removed, and stuck it in the ground at the home of this lady, and then he went on his travels, and he came back, pulled it up, and brought it back to the U.S., and it survived fine. That was the palatable clone, the source of what's circulating on that. The palatable clone deserves mention. It tastes about like off-tasting lettuce. It's hardly bitter, and that's a real advantage. It's equipotent. So for Salvia is bitter, but it's not horrible.
What parts of the plant are which
The flowers have been tried in this chewing method and don't do anything. The whole grass. There are no seeds. We don't know about that. The roots, no one's really looked at that. But I bet it's in the leaves. The stems don't have much of it either. So it's probably just in the leaves.
The seeds just won't grow. The seeds don't.
There are no seeds. It's not. It's a
Valdez got it to produce seed by crossing two streams, and somebody physically killed the seeds by overheating them with cold cream. And established their viability.
Yeah, now there are in cultivation in the U.S. 4 distinct strains of it, and if they simultaneously flower and someone were to cross-pollinate, then seeds can be produced. It's been done once, as Jonathan said. They had them in an incubator at the university in Ann Arbor, and it overheated, and the seedlings all died. It's really...
I don't think they were even got to the seeds.
They just cooked the seeds. So it's not even known if the seeds would have germinated, I guess.
So you just pop in like cuttings?
Easily germinated.
Super easy. You just take a tip. It's amazing how, the squash, flat plants, dried out, lose their, well, it's not that amazing. They do lose their characteristics. This is dried up quite considerably, but if you take, a piece like this, take these leaves off, put it in water up to here, it'll sprout roots out of the stem in 10 days.
In the flower?
Well, in an unflowering specimen, yeah. You leave the tip, but pinch off all of the leaves that might wilt. The roots like it, just super easy.
So it flops over and just touching the ground with roots.
Have you noticed, like coleus, you might want to cut off the flower to keep the plant vigorous?
Well, it's unlikely. I don't want to cut the flowers off because I really like it. It's an unusual thing to have in flower.
That's true.
By the time they flower, they're really big, and I have to cut them back after that anyway. But, it's not... I suppose in a tropical place, and you wouldn't want these giant things falling all over. Yeah, pruning them back all the time would be...
The flowers last a long time.
They're really,
like
really
beautiful.
I did have some to flower, and this was in about a 60-inch high chamber.
So can you chew the dried leaves as well?
Yeah.
Also
I haven't tried chewing the dried leaves, but I think it's been done.
And people smoke the dried leaves.
Yeah. If anyone's interested in obtaining dried leaves or live plants, you can order them from one of those places.
Are you going to be able to handle all the orders you'll be getting after these 2 seminars?
Yeah, I'm really gearing up for it this year. This is the year of Salvia Divinorum, I think. The word's gotten out. It's like I say, it's languished as a minor hallucinogenic plant that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. And now this information is available. It doesn't take very many leaves. Anyone growing 1 or 2 plants can have major experiences frequently.
Again, this was brought to scientific attention and introduced in international horticulture by Gordon Wasson in the early 60s.
In the early 60s, it hasn't been around.
Brought out live specimens, got it identified mechanically.
Yeah. So Salvinorum, brand new thing, and remarkably potent.
Has that ingredient found in the other plants?
Not yet, no.
But it's sure worth looking, because this is a case where Hoffman took back the material to analyze because he was looking for alkaloids.
Right.
He threw out the fraction that had the stuff in it, and it's not an alkaloid. And so this plants that can
conserve the juice and alcohol. Took that back, and we couldn't establish any activity. But that's not to say it was in there. They just couldn't. They didn't find any way of getting an assay for it.
Yeah.
Well, I thought of a name so that maybe if the government hears about it, they wouldn't be so quick to locate.
Yeah, someone had a, what was the,
Surf Main.
what was it? No, Dean's last course had, his son had a word, stumbled rats or something.
Stumble dope.
Stumbled. Because when they smoke it, they can't walk straight.
And then Jim DeCorn, one of our former seminar participants in that entheogen, what is it called, the entheogen review. He's already more or less planted the idea of illegalizing the thing in the minds of the pets. And when you read that, there's a big sidebar saying, word will get out and they'll legalize this. If that doesn't alert them to it, I don't know what.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
How about unzippy? Unzippy. That's what it does.
Well, Salvinorum is good. It just doesn't translate well.
Divinorum was a better name. That was what was originally proposed by the other group, but
somebody had already isolated.
Divinorum.
So isn't what happened the guy who made the isolate, he tested this thing happened. He got a standard of submarine alpha for chromatographic standard or something, and smoked it exactly as he had smoked his extract, and he did exactly.
Yeah, there's no question it's the active principle. I've highly purified it and gotten definitive chemical information on the molecular weight and so forth that leads me to certainty that it's a pure sample of salvinorin A. There are two salvinorins, salvinorin A and salvinorin B, and I'll tell you exactly what happened. A group, the Ortega group, isolated it in 1982 or 1981. I think it was 82. The references are in Pharmacopoeia. Published it, and they named it salvinorin, not A or B. They only isolated one compound. They called it salvinorin. And without any bioassay, they were just fishing for terpenes in salvia because they had been working on there are other salvias that contain similar diterpenes. The terpene is just a catch-all chemical class for substances without nitrogen of the general formula C10H15. The diterpene is C20H30. A sesquiterpene is C15H22, and so forth. And so this group reported it with no indication of activity. Again, they're right around this time, the Valdez group with Jose Luis Diaz had reported fairly extensive in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology ethnographic data on the leaf, including their own experiments with using the leaf in the Mazatec country. Watson had also reported his experiments in the 60s. There were two ethnographic papers in the literature describing self-experiments with the leaf. And these guys just got clued in because they knew it was a psychoactive salvia. They were looking for terpenes above maybe. They didn't even make any suggestions. They didn't even cite any of the ethnographic data. They just latched on to it because it was available as a cultivatable strain of an ethnomedicinal salvia. So there it sat. And then 2 more years later, this Mexican-American group under Valdez was getting his PhD at the University of Michigan. He was working with George Hatfield at the University of Michigan. And they subsequently isolated 2 compounds and called them Divinorum A and Divinorum B. And it turned out that Divinorum A was the same as salvinorin, so the correct name is salvinorin A and B for the 2 compounds that they isolated. He was just trying to isolate the active principle following one of the methods that are mentioned in these 2 papers. As I say, the Ortega method is a great deal simpler than the Valdez method. Just by blundering, he's not a chemist, and he just blundered onto the fact that you could readily get this stuff to precipitate out of an organic phase solution. Not pure. He thought it was crystalline, but it wasn't at all. As I say, didn't have any real experience with this kind of chemistry. I'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow morning and this kind of work and show you the slides and how it's done. The early experiences with smoking it, they couldn't get it to precipitate what an active oil. They started smoking it, and we're all based on preparations. We purified it much more than that. But I assume that if Sievert's working with nickels, that there would be no problem for nickels to purify it to the extent that we have. And I've been doing experiments. I made a standard solution this past summer in July before going to Europe, and I gave, in our last seminar in Hawaii, I gave a vial of it to Terence McKenna, and he was going to pass it on to Nichols. I assume that's what happened. I don't know, because I heard back from Terence. We were experimenting with a standard solution, dosing it with micropipettes down to the microgram, literally. And we started smoking the pure compound in pipettes, it was in an acetone solution. And subsequently, I had also sent out a sample to get a mass spectral analysis of the same lot. And it came back with the precise parent ion you would expect for salvinorin A and the appropriate fragments. And there are ways of modifying the mass spectral procedure to give you purity data as well. It came back being highly pure salvinorin A. And so we know that is, and as Terence mentioned, Sievert subsequently got a rise finally out of Valdez. I've been trying to get a response from him for years and asked him to send me samples of this salvinorin, which they never tested in human beings. I guess he did smoke some of Valdez's pure salvinorin, and it's isolated. No one's even published a synthesis for the compound, and it would be a tricky synthesis of them. Yes?
They found a cannabinoid receptor site. Have they found out what part of the cannabinoid molecule is active, and is there any piece of the salvinorin molecule that might fit? No, they're like non-nitrous.
I don't think it has anything to do with the cannabis. The THC receptor is for the hydrocarbon side chain. There recently, what Bob's referring to is people have isolated a receptor for THC in the brain, or for some neuromolecule which the THC molecule mimics in the brain and fits into the same receptor. That was isolated, and just about almost exactly a year ago, the endogenous ligand of that receptor is identified and named anandamide. It's, chemically speaking, it's a arachidonyl ethanol amide. It's just a hydrocarbon side chain, and it's not the ring of THC that fits that particular receptor, but the hydrocarbon side chain. But the theory that the absinthe-type compounds, thujones, would fit the same receptor is not true. At least for that receptor, they wouldn't fit it. And there's nothing in salvinorin that would really fit that receptor either.
Is it at all like thujonen?
Is it at all like thujonen? What, salvinorin?
Salvinorin.
No. My first impulse was when I heard of, I heard about the smoking activity in 1975. I was actually the first one to report it. Mexican students were smoking the leaves. I theorized, since other salvias contain thujones, the active principles of absinthe, or absinthium that I talked about the other night, that maybe salvia leaf did too. But I tried to do steam distillation on fresh leaves of Salvia divinorum, and there was no volatile oil fraction at all. And it simply doesn't have volatile oils. I'm sure the flower tops would, and whether they contain thujone or not, I don't know. I haven't examined that. Basically, that's where it's at until someone came along 10 years later, experimenting in the basement, trying to isolate this compound to test it. I had the same project on my agenda. And lo and behold, got a crude precipitate that was salvinorin enriched and was smokable in that form, and established that here was the same activity that you find in the whole leaf. And we now know that it is from salvinorin A. There's no question.
It's strange that it's not. The compound itself isn't active orally or sublingually, but...
No, it is. It's just a question of solubility in the membrane. It certainly is active sublingually.
So I recommend people just try the leaves, as Jonathan was saying, and find out what that does for you. But the compound itself, it's very difficult to measure. It's so strong. I don't think it has a medical or health risk, but I think the big problem will be circumstantial, because many people have reported physically moving their bodies either from one room to another or elsewise, and not knowing that they did so. And, for example, I had a candle burning when I first smoked it, and it would be real easy to have knocked that over, and I would have never seen or noticed it for 10 minutes.
What is the duration?
It lasts... I was thinking it lasted 10 minutes, but I think it's more like watching people that I've given it to. It lasts more like 20 minutes to full back to reality and be able to talk about it. About 20 minutes, but chewing the leaves lasts more like 45 minutes. And it's very similar. You definitely get a taste of what that's like. And I don't think, experimentally, I don't think chewing more leaves makes a more intense experience. It seems like 10 is plenty, 6 is sufficient, and more than 10 doesn't seem to add into the experience, nor does holding it in your mouth longer. So you can definitely reliably have this very full experience trying just chewing those leaves. That's what I would suggest.